Okay, the mayor, so we will go ahead and start preliminary discussions, and hopefully he'll arrive shortly. Generally at workshops, we don't go through the prayer and all of that stuff. Is that the way we're still doing it? Okay. In that case, we will call this meeting to order. And our topic is impacts of the Crosstown connector at the intersection of US Highway 98 and Stallman Avenue. And of course, we discussed that earlier. And so I think I made the motion to put this into place. And of course, what I'd like to discuss with my fellow council people is a little more in the design of the actual roadway itself. And I will start down on this end. If you have any comments or thoughts on the actual design.
Thank you, Mr. Dewey. Yeah, I've got a couple things, and you want to keep this strictly to the concept and the design of Crosstown connector. My understanding was, well, it doesn't matter. I know I have a lot of thoughts on this subject in particular. I live in Old Destin. I spend a lot of time driving down the current Crosstown connector, and I passed. Now, granted, it was 5:15 this evening, and I passed 14 cars between Benning and Beach Drive on Legion Drive. Before, in preparation for this workshop, I ran several tests, just like a tourist would or anybody else. And if I'm out of line here, just tell me to shut up. I ran 4 or 5 tests from the far west side over by 98 McGuire's, Dewey's on the Bay, to Best Buy. Excuse me. And every one of them, except for the ones that kept you on 98 the whole way, took you down Kelly Street, Main, and Airport. I know better how to get here because I've been doing it for 34 years. And it takes me down Legion Drive, Beach Drive, Legion Drive, Airport. So anyways, all that to say, and in the process of looking at it, you see what's on Kelly Street. You got a school, you got a daycare, you got houses, parks, and we could go on and on, but that's kind of where my thinking is with it. And I think if you keep it to 2 lanes, I think it's very advantageous. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. I agree with Johnny. I literally run, not drive, but run down from Kelly to Airport and gone down Main. And I see out-of-town tags all the time. I see more out-of-town tags between 4 o'clock in the afternoon and 6 o'clock in the evening on the back roads, and I see local tags. So I'm in favor of this Crosstown connector. 2 lanes is fine. Gives people a direction. As far as the design, I'll leave that up to the professionals. I don't know how to design something that would be proper with the buildings and the streets and the lights, but I'm in favor of it.
So I think this is a much better design. I do have some worries about the potential for a 4-lane expansion, but I did read the comments where it talked about, obviously there's different infrastructure that goes in place beneath the curb and in other areas over there that would prevent the expansion to a 4-lane, but to me, well, we'll fill that in and then we'll move, but whatever. I mean, what I'd like to see, and I know this is an idea that we have batted around before, is doing a linear park or something that would benefit the entire community along that. And of course, we know that now with the passage of that last amendment, parks and things of that nature would require, I believe, going to a referendum or something of that nature. So putting in a park that would really ensure it's going to be there for a while, it's going to beautify and really add to the aesthetics of the particular section of the connector and to the community as a whole, I would be very much in favor of ensuring we're doing something alongside this project so that they are, unveiled, so to speak, simultaneously, or at least within the same time frame.
And I agree with, I think, everyone so far, the Crosstown connector will be a benefit. My fear is that we turn it into something akin to a raceway, and that can be easily thwarted by putting certain traffic controlling concepts, devices. As we spoke at the last meeting when we talked about the slow speed vehicles on airport, we already have a pretty bad problem on airport where people are speeding. Airport's design is equivalent to Highway 98. The speed limit is the same. People are doing, as they always do, 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. So we actually have people at 45 and 50 on airport, and it's a straight shot with nothing to slow the traffic down. And so my idea of going forth with this discussion was that we look at some ways to make sure that we don't put a 98 bypass through the heart of town. It would be simple, or at least it's a starting point, to say we should lower the speed limit on this crosstowner. If we say 25, people are going to go 35. So that's one point. We need to be prepared to set the speed limit. The other thing that we would want to consider is various ways we have of slowing traffic down. I know that our engineer is a little hesitant with four-way stops and speed bumps and things like that, but they're used all over the country. Four-way stops. I would point out when we redid Mountain Drive, City Manager Casella was very concerned that it would turn into a straight speedway, and would have. I think we have, starting at Beach, we have four-way stops within about a mile and a half or a mile and a quarter. And there really isn't any speeding that I have seen on that road for that very reason. And so that is one method we can implore. We can put a number of four-way stops as we go along to slow the traffic down. I have actually seen DOT studies that say as you slow the traffic down, it concentrates more, and you actually get more traffic through a corridor like that. And so I don't think we would impede the amount of cars we could go through. We would just make them going through at a safer speed. After all, out at on 30A, as you drive down 30A, you will find literally dozens of stop signs on pedestrian crossways, speed bumps, and people, for the most part, are not speeding on 30A. They're slowing down and looking as they travel through. That's where we need to go with this corridor, so that we don't cause a safety issue right through the middle of town. That is one primary concern, and we can, at a meeting where we can vote to direct our road designers to do that. And my other issue that I'd like to support is what Ms. Renzo was talking about. As we come to the campground that we acquired, which is going to be the new segment after all the rest of it's there already, we need to consider seriously moving the right-of-way over to one side. It looks to me like the right side would be the appropriate side, and using the rest of that long linear distance as a greenway. And then we're going to get our corridor, and we're going to get a very nice place where people can recreate. The other issue I wanted to bring up, and I had three, I've gotten through two, is we need, for the first time in the city's history, to actually do a multimodal pathway like they have on 30A, or like they have in Destin, and we could incorporate it into the right-of-way quite easily. Now, the design, how wide, we'll have to let the professionals look at that. But if we put that in our right-of-way and actually have a multimodal pathway, that's used like it is in South Walton or Sandestin, where they're literally, I went down there last week and there were literally hundreds of people on their bicycles and walking up and down that pathway. We could have a corridor that starts on the east side of Airport that would go all the way to the bridge, basically. And I think all three of these perhaps suggestions we need to consider in council and give that direction to our designers.
I like that idea, and I think it builds on what we've all been talking about up here and really making something attractive and beneficial for the community while allowing that through access that we've talked about. I know when I look at the plans, these initial sets of plans, there's 5 foot on either side for a dedicated bike lane. So there's 10 feet right there that, you know, maybe if we did what you're talking about and incorporated like an entire multimodal space, you could actually create even more space for it by removing these bike lines and then bike lanes and then doing that on either side of the modal trail or something. But just different ways of looking at
That's right.
incorporating what we're all sort of bouncing about.
Yeah, and we have 10 feet right there, and it's a 91 or 92, 3-foot right-of-way, so we have room to put that in there. And it'll be a first for us. We will have actually done a multimodal project. Yes, please go ahead.
Can I address the engineer? And I know that a lot of this has been designed and it's already in a phase. Can we hear from you if any of this that we're talking about in creating this sort of recreational, multimodal side path next to this Crosstown connector, could we get some feedback from y'all? Are we asking for something? Are we now putting the cart before the horse? Can you give us some feedback on the realities of at least what the 4 of us are looking for, please?
Well, if it's okay, council, I'll have Jessica actually do her presentation that she has for us on the park. I think that would be a good place to go next, if that's okay. Okay, so James, if you can. Yeah, and then.
Yeah. That's all right. You said engineer. I didn't know if you were talking to me or Donna.
And just in.
You are one
in-
too.
In terms of
We're looking at each
introduction, this is Jessica Galima from Adkins, and a very capable engineer. I can say overall, been very happy to work with her. So
I may be
Jessica,
a
take it
capable
away.
engineer. I'm not a capable public speaker, so y'all bear with me. So, are you doing that? Okay. Anyway, so I'm Jessica Galima. I work with Atkins, and I'm the engineer of record for this project. And I figured we would start out a little bit just kind of where we've been. And I know you guys have all seen this before, so it's really for more just as a refresh and for the benefit of anybody that hasn't. All right, so as you probably already know, the Crosstown connector is the missing link essentially between Beach and Benning. And this is what's missing to provide a continuous alternative to US 98. This is just a quick graphic kind of where we are with the design right now, plus some additional sidewalk. So we got a little artsy on the sidewalk here, but you'll notice it's a 2-lane facility with a small median. At Benning Drive, we've got a 4-way stop, and at Beach, we've got a roundabout, and we'll talk about that just a little bit more in a minute. So as far as design criteria, we're looking at a posted speed of 25, a design speed of 35. 11-foot travel lanes, 5-foot bike lanes, small median, just wide enough to put a few trees, 10-foot sidewalks with a 6-foot buffer behind the curb. This is a rough schematic of the typical section. And going back a little bit to the intersections, so we've done traffic analysis at Beach and Benning to settle on the intersections that we've come up with, and we considered traffic operations, safety, right-of-way utility impacts, the whole gambit. And at Benning, the roundabout was the winner until you started considering the peripherals, such as right-of-way acquisition and utility relocations. So an all-way stop, you still get an acceptable level of service and really good safety. So that's part of the reason why we chose the four-way stop at Benning, but also because right now we don't need any right-of-way at that intersection, and we're able to avoid overhead utilities and sanitary sewer at that location. And also, previous council directed that we do not use a roundabout at that location.
Jessica, too, we do want to bring up at the Harbor CRA committee meeting, board committee, it was brought up that we should evaluate this intersection by the Harbor CRA to look at a roundabout. So we wanted to just bring that to your attention.
Same thing at Beach, we looked at that one as well, and at Beach, the roundabout was the winner from a safety and operations standpoint, but also at Beach, you've got a little bit of an odd geometry there that the roundabout helps to mitigate. Okay, so you guys have, several of you voiced concerns about this one day becoming a 4-lane facility and how you'd like to keep it a 2-lane. It's not impossible to one day make it a 4-lane facility, but if you don't start from the beginning planning for a 4-lane, it's expensive. It'd be expensive and difficult to do. So had we started from that point, like they did in the previous design, you go ahead and you size your drainage for 4 lanes, your ponds, all your trunk lines, and set your utilities out of the way as well. Now, with where we are right now with the 2-lane, you would have to widen to the outside, which pretty much would be an entire drainage rebuild. Your ponds aren't going to be big enough, so you would have to figure out a way to either enlarge your ponds, add some under drain facilities. You would need more right-of-way. And right now, if we are given the go-ahead to continue with design, we're looking at the feasibility of a utility corridor along the south side of the project for future gas and water lines. Once those go in, that would be another thing that would have to be moved or changed. So while it's not impossible, it would be expensive and impactful. And any change there would require council approval. So just a word on schedule. We are in the 60% plans phase. We were coming up on a 60% submittal before we were asked to stop. If given the go-ahead again, we'll be making that submittal, within probably about a month. And then at that point, the reevaluation would kick off. And, if all goes well, we could theoretically begin construction early in 2024 with a likely 2-year construction time. Now, all of that hinges on right-of-way acquisition going perfectly. And right-of-way acquisition is the controlling element in all of this right now. So we've allotted 2 years in the schedule, but that can change based on a handful of factors that I'm not necessarily qualified to discuss. So we've got Marcia Hayes, who is the acquisition consultant, on the line, and she's going to give you just a brief word on the process and the things that can cause it to speed up or slow down. So, Marcia, if you're there.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. It's typically on a right-of-way project, we always plan for 24 months just to basically determine if there are going to be any changes along the way. Now that's on a typical DOT project where we have eminent domain that we can fall back on for those property owners that are not willing to sell their property. With this type of project where it is a voluntary acquisition, it makes it a lot more difficult because you either have to, if you're lucky, you go out and you make the offers to everyone and everyone accepts the offer, or you can negotiate the offer out and get everyone moved within that time frame. But, there's certain factors that determine how long a project takes. Typically, on an acquisition project with voluntary acquisition, I have spent anywhere, from 2 to 10 years acquiring property. just simply because you're either having to just continue to work with that property owner to reach an agreement and get them in the frame of mind where they're on board with the project and accepting, what we're trying to do, or we have to redesign around that parcel that is unwilling to sell. So that takes time. And, while I would love to say that I could go out there and make offers to everyone that we're looking at, it would be very difficult to do that in a constrained time period. So I appreciate that the 2 years is in there, but I would just say if eminent domain is not going to be used, that it may or may not happen within that time frame. And so I believe that's what Jessica is referring to as far as, it may be pushed out or, brought back in, just determined on the success of the acquisition. Does that answer your question, Jessica?
How many more properties are we still awaiting to acquire?
So we're looking at, I think it is 9 full property acquisitions and a couple of temporary construction easements or little corner clips for sidewalk.
So just a question, because I know this, whether 4-lane or 2-lane, whatever, this has been in process for many years. So in terms of needing to look into eminent domain, has the city, I mean, I'm sure we've already approached some of these people. I mean, aren't we, rather than starting from the very beginning of an eminent domain process, aren't we at least further along in that process and having had reached out to some of these property owners?
I'm going to defer to Marcia on that because she has worked with many of these property owners already.
Yes, I mean, we have been successful on acquiring and relocating 3 of the properties. Actually, one of them was not occupied at the time. But, I have had some difficulty. Some we would get right to the table as far as getting an agreement, and then they would pull back, or I could not get approval for an increase. And I do have one property that I have not been able to contact at all. I mean, I've tried every method of contacting the property owner and have not been able to either get them to answer the door, answer the phone, respond to a letter, any of those things. So, but yes, we are in the process. Before the project was placed on hold for redesign, we were actively in the process of acquiring the parcels.
If I may, Mayor, let's get back to the question that Ms. Hebert asked. You would be able to design in some of the features we talked about should they successfully be voted on by the council, such as a multimodal pathway or some of the other issues. It looks to me like you, on your design, already have the right-of-way as it goes through the old campground on the northern edge, which there wouldn't be a change there. And I saw that you are recommending 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, which we assume will create 35-mile-an-hour traffic on that road. So those two are not changes. Putting in the multimodal pathway would incur a design change, which I know that you all can do, and especially since our window of acquisition is from 2 to 10 years, it would not put us far behind. I don't know if any of the staff or any of the council have been involved in a condemnation. I have, and the 6 or 7 years can drag out that long and cost a whole lot of money. So it doesn't look to me like the design time is going to be the crunch. The real crunch is going to be acquiring the property. So, I guess, and I will let you answer, but if we change the design to include a multimodal or some other changes, you all are completely capable of doing that, I would think.
Yes, we are, and within the right-of-way that we've got.
Yes, yes.
Now, you may have, there's a couple of places where we've got pinch points, and to avoid impacting additional property owners, your path wouldn't have to neck down, but that would just be isolated locations. But in general, you've got the right-of-way to do it in the space,
Yeah,
so. And I've
Okay.
got pictures.
thanks.
So, and I have a question here, from the time perspective. What is the best path for this council to go forth with as far as making sure that the property acquisition is where we want to go in a timely manner? Because as Mr. Destin just said, that could be the biggest time holdup out of every aspect of this project. So, I just want to kind of get a feel for what kind of message we need to send clear to the property owners that we're serious about it, where we want to do these deals and get it done, so we can finish our project. Because I did receive some correspondence last year from some property owners who were willing sellers, but they just didn't know where in the heck they stood because they weren't sure what we were going to do. So I'd like some recommendations from y'all on how we should proceed on that aspect.
As far as how to proceed with the property owners, I'll leave that to these folks, but in general, I would say just to start right-of-way acquisition as soon as possible. And we're at a point in the design where I can give Marcia a list of properties to go ahead and get started. I mean, we're ready. So it would just be a matter of getting her under contract. And as far as messaging with property owners, you guys,
Do you need a vote from us tonight to make that start?
no, I think that's coming before you next week.
Yes, that's correct. We will be bringing that to you on the 17th.
And that's just going to be to add Marcia and the appraisers to the contract. And then once that's executed, they can, I mean, from my end anyway, they can get started right away. We're ready. We're ready from a design standpoint.
One point of clarification, our right-of-way that we conceive of now is not going to change. I don't think we have any idea of changing that, so that should not hold up property acquisition, since we already know what that is.
Most of the properties that we're hitting are unfortunately going to be a full take. So inches one way or the other don't make a difference.
Yeah, well, my experience, whole take is better than a part take. It's amazing how much those parts are worth.
Now, there's probably going to be a couple of temporary construction easements. That is still being refined, but that is not the lion's share of the work.
Right, so we can go forward with that, starting next week or whenever we can vote on that.
Right.
I just wanted to clarify that, the right-of-way we plan now won't be changing. Even if we vote to put the multimodal pathway in, it should still be able to fit.
Right, with some modifications at pinch points.
Right.
But
All right.
generally,
Hopefully-
yes.
Hopefully those modifications won't be major.
So if,
Another question while I'm at it. I know we had a recommendation. We are at the point now where we're having a four-way stop at Benning, even though we've got a recommendation from the CRA to look at that issue. The other intersection, which is on Beach, I believe, it's a four-way stop now. And we have in our design three-way. Anyway, there's some stops there. We have in our design to put a roundabout, which, because the configuration may improve, however, roundabouts are used to facilitate the flow of traffic. And that goes back to the question I was talking about earlier, is too many roundabouts, too much facilitation, and we're going to have a raceway through town. So,
roundabouts are typically used for traffic calming, and this one, because it's at such a odd angle, you end
Yeah.
up with some wider entry and exit points than you would necessarily want. So what we're doing to mitigate that, in those locations where the roadway gets too wide, we're using, in these roundabouts out here, you've got that truck apron in the center to allow larger vehicles to get through, but still to, make cars feel like they're on a smaller path. We're using some of those on the outside too, to keep the pathway for your typical passenger vehicle small. But if somebody's trying to get through, pulling a trailer or an RV or a boat or whatever, they can mount that curb, but you wouldn't necessarily want to do it in a passenger car doing 35 miles an hour.
yeah, and the only point I would make is leaving it as a three-way stop would be a natural speed break. And I'm not sure that we would harm the flow other than we would slow it down some. Now, we need to look at that, and I'll be happy to talk to Don and the other engineers to see which is going to be the best outcome depending on the goal we're looking at. I can see that we could still do the roundabout and have some other traffic or speed control methods on either side. So that's one we'll look at, but, you know, it is a three-way stop now. And that's my one fear of what we're doing is putting a racetrack through the middle of town, because from the beginning of airport to that point, we have one stoplight. So that's an
Have you
issue
been
we
on a
have.
roundabout lately? They're terribly slow.
If they go around the right way.
Dr. Ramsdell, did you have something you wanted to ask? I thought you were going to key your mic. Are you good?
Well, I did kind of, and it was, I guess, a question for Mr. Destin and the rest of the council, but looking at the rendering that is in our packet that's showing, I guess that's a park on the sort of bottom left and then one underneath the road on the right, more linear. Is that what you all had in mind as far as location of those particular paths, or was it flipped? That was my question.
There it is.
And just for my own clarity, Mr. Destin, at the last meeting, when you were talking about the multimodal, with this drawing right here, the typical section, are we going to narrow one of the sidewalks to make more room for golf carts and stuff?
We would let the engineers look at that and figure out the best way to do it, would be my opinion.
Okay, and we'll see that when they come back with what would that be, the 90% plan at that time?
If it gets changed.
If you,
60%.
60,
would be the
okay.
next set.
all right.
So, you know, we were looking at this project from a multimodal standpoint, and some goals there would be to provide a recreational amenity to the surrounding community, definitely to beautify the area, provide a safer space for bicyclists and pedestrians, and then, you know, potentially have a more efficient transit route in coordination with Okaloosa County Transit. That would be up to them, but we could definitely sustain it, and then you're kind of providing for all users at that point.
You know what I was just thinking about, you all, was pickleball courts. Maybe this is an opportunity to have new little sections.
We'd have to have parking for that.
All right, so this is back to that graphic we've looked at once before, and the roadway, that is the actual roadway that's in the design right now. The sidewalks, that was just a concept sketch, some stuff we were thinking about. And we'll look a little bit more into this, but we'll go back to that. So one prime area for different park-like amenities would be see that triangular shaped piece in the upper corner? We'll talk about that a little bit more, but just so you've got kind of in your mind, that's where we've got the biggest chance for doing something really, really cool. So if you can see it in this drawing, I've got yellow, green, and red circles. And the green circles are parks within a half mile of the project. The red are further out. And the yellow circle is a radius around this project. So putting any kind of a park facility along the project would, in a way, bridge the gap, fill a hole, folks in this area, so that they would have a more direct, easy walk to some kind of an amenity that they don't have currently. And now these are just kind of ideas we've been looking at. So one would be, like a fitness loop area kind of thing. The sidewalk shown in the graphic around the long skinny pond, that's about 1/3 of a mile. So you could put little mile markers and make it almost like a walking path. There's all kinds of fitness equipment out there you can do outdoors. This one happens to be covered, which I particularly like because it's way too hot here most of the time. And these can also be obtained in handicap accessible versions. Another idea would be an art walk, and somewhere like along these paths you could display large scale art, sculptures. I know Destin's got a pretty vibrant art community, so maybe that's something you could partner with folks and do kind of like rotating exhibits, have visiting artists. Just a thought there, but that's kind of a neat thing. gathering space. So particularly in that area where you had the big triangular piece, you know, it's kind of a prime area for maybe a picnic table, some gazebos, benches, something like that. And this is Barrett Square in Rosemary Beach, and I like this example because they've done a lot with little. It's not a very big area, but they've got a water feature, they've got art, they've got benches, trash cans, sidewalks, and and shade trees, and it just looks really nice. So this is just kind of to give you an idea of scale. This is a project that Escambia County is working on right now. It's in design. But this little parcel is about the same size as that triangular piece we were looking at. It's about 3/4 of an acre. And this one's kind of oddly shaped as well. And so what they've done here is they're looking at doing extensive landscaping, paths, seating areas. They've got a decorative little bridge over a swale. And this is not built yet, so this is still in the design phase, but neat to look at nonetheless. And those are just some graphics of the little park. So, I mean, these were ideas on a relatively blank slate, and, you know, your imagination and budget is basically where it stops. So just some ideas for things that could be done, and we do have the right-of-way to do quite a bit with. So,
I have a question, of course.
this is your slide.
So, looking at this, obviously that nice little triangle part and really virtually the entire connector is going to, at some point, be very close to residences. What type of buffer or fencing are we looking at to separate our area, the connector of the park, from this housing? And is it something that's been discussed with those particular residents?
As far as I know, it's not been discussed with the residents yet, but most of those backyards already have fences, and I assume that's by virtue of the fact that the property used to be a campground. But we are planning on vegetative buffer and, you know, thickening that up in areas where we get real close.
And just the going from 4 lanes to 2 lanes create just a space buffer. Like, of course, you show greenery and sidewalks, and so there'll be more of a literal space buffer between the 2 lanes versus the 4 anyways, right?
It does until you get to,
Where?
okay, see over there
On
by
that
the
curve?
roundabout where it starts to come back up
Yeah.
to meet Legion? That's where it's close, no matter whether you've got 2, 4, 8 lanes.
Right.
It's just trying to meet that intersection. You are close right there no matter what. But everywhere else, you've got a little bit more space.
Yeah, the big area is going to be to the south because you got double sidewalks going around the swale, correct?
Right. You've got a lot of space there.
The other thing we could also go after is maybe some grant money for building parks. I know that we've got a great grant team that have found some unique ways to get monies that the state's always trying to give out, the government's trying to, you know, do more with the aesthetically pleasing recreational and park areas. So this looks good. Thank you so much.
One thing that really hit me was your rings, because that is an older part of Destin. You know, that was one of the very first subdivisions all around Benning Drive and stuff like that. And it's kind of remarkable how they don't have that kind of access to a walk to aesthetic greenery type area. So, I mean, I don't think we've ever even talked about that aspect to the connector until we've seen that, and that's actually one of those unintended benefits that we didn't think about.
Well, it's a short area, but I mean, it's got the potential to be a statement piece.
And the other point is, I think the right-of-way on Azalea, how wide is that? Do we remember? It's a pretty big right-of-way. So we could actually extend our multimodal pathway all the way down almost to the bridge.
And there's already on Azalea, I think, a 10-foot path on both sides towards the back of the right-of-way.
Yeah, we do, Joe has confirmed, I believe, that we have 100 feet on Azalea, so.
So it's actually bigger than this right-of-way.
So we could probably add to what we're doing here at a later
Yep.
date, right?
At a pretty reasonable price, I would think, since that right-of-way is already there.
Any further questions, guys? Well, thank you for that presentation. At this time, would y'all like to entertain some comments from the folks here and hear what they have to say? what we'll do at this point is I'll just look out in the audience. If anybody would like to, after seeing this presentation, come on up. We'll give you 3 minutes. State your name, where you live, and any comments are welcome. This is part of the workshop process, is to hear from you, your ideas. Maybe you can like some of the stuff you see or dislike some of the stuff you see, or maybe even bring up something that hasn't been discussed here at all that might pique everybody's interest. So I'll just start over here at the far side of the room if anybody would like to come up and make any comments. Yeah. Come on up. Anybody? Mr. Woods, I thought I saw you getting ready to get up. Come on. I hate to call you out like that, but you look ready to go, so go ahead.
Jim Wood, 3790 Misty Way. First of all, I'm a big supporter of the connector. Been that way for 13 years, not going to go away. It pains me it's going to take us probably 25 years to build a quarter-of-a-mile long road. That kind of bugs me. I like the plans I see here. One of the things that I noticed a few weeks ago, we had the last big backup in Destin when the lines were on 98. So when I first heard of the Destin connector, back when I first came on the council in 2008, I read a pamphlet that talked about alternate 98. And I'm like, no, we're not doing alternate 98. One of the problems we have is when 98 backs up, what happens? The connector becomes alternate 98. And not wanting it to be that, maybe that's a little wishful thinking, possibly. Maybe we need to look at it. It needs to be, it needs to facilitate traffic to get off of our city streets when things back up. Now, it doesn't happen that often. You plan for worst case, best case, or most probable case, and you can run the gamut. I know on Misty Way, we backed up to the second straightaway that night. And 95% of the cars were out-of-state cars. I went out and talked to a lot of them that came by. And of course, their little GPS on their phone tell them to go up Main, hang a right on North Lakeside, and come back around thinking that's going to miss the traffic, and it didn't happen. So, but the parks are always good. I love to walk on all the wide sidewalks around town. I do it every day, so I'm looking forward to seeing a new park go in there. I just wish it was going to be sooner than later. One of my concerns is, are we going to run out all the money that's been promised? As we drag this out longer and longer, is that going to be an issue at some point in time? That hey, we gave you money 5 years ago, you're not spending it, we're going to maybe take it back. I don't know. That concerns me a little bit if it takes too long. So I'm glad y'all are moving forward. We used to whipsaw back and forth. And the longer this goes on, the more councils come up here, the more times we can go back and forth. So we need to get this locked in some kind of concrete and move forward with it and stop changing the plans. So, but I'll always be a supporter of the Destin connector, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. The good news is the money's not going to go away. We've got that squared away, and I think this council and the staff are committed to get it done. So there's certain things timeline-wise you just can't overcome, and acquiring those properties will always be something we can't put a timeline on. Anyone else? Come on up.
Good evening. Sorry to come in late and then ask to speak, but it's tough getting here from Santa Rosa Beach these days.
I was 20 minutes late, so you got an excuse.
Thanks for the break on that.
Sir,
30.
could you state your name for the record, please?
John King, Senior. I stood at a podium, and I was 37 years ago, 35 years ago, I don't know. We were talking about the DOT gave a plan. They gave 3 plans, and Mr. Destin, remember that. They came in and they said, we're going to do this 1 of 3 ways. We're going to go down to Azalea, where we have 150-foot right-of-way, and we're going to cross Beach Drive before the townhouses and houses next to the church, and we're going to go out to what's now Kelly Plantation and Regatta Bay and Emerald Bay, none of which were there. And they said, we're going to have this alternate 98 so we can get around, and it sounded great. I was only there because I had a piece of property of a client's there that I was wanted to make sure they knew what was going on, and it was for sale, and it was like this unheard of kind of price. It was like $10,000 an acre, and you know, it was the biggest per acre or square foot price of anything at that point, and it was a great opportunity that we didn't take advantage of. And the reason that we didn't is, I think, is the next speaker, after I sat down, got up and said, if you do this, you're going to tear this town apart, and raised hell. And the city father said, we don't need to be doing this. And it was a bad move. I don't know what it would look like if it wasn't, but I just wrote in to say that 15, 18 years after that, I read a study or saw it on the newspaper, and the study said that 51% of the traffic on Highway 98 was through traffic. And I may have the numbers, I think it was, so it was through traffic. And so it got really difficult because of the construction and so on on Highway 98, but it got really difficult, and I think people started going away from Highway 98 and going 20, whatever. I'm not a traffic engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but I'll say that it seemed to be, it never did alleviate the need to get through Destin. But now we have 331 coming from Panama City that's 4-lane, and people are going to go that way. And then we've got Highway 20 resurfaced. It's a little more comfortable drive, and they may have been getting around Destin. But now we have soon to be open, we have 6 lanes in Santa Rosa and Miramar. And so now what's going to happen if we got people knowing we got 6 lanes of traffic, thinking they can get through, and then here we are stopped at Airport Road. And I just think you're missing another great opportunity. I have friends that are going to be affected, and I think they think in a negative way. I'm making an assumption that you're paying people a fair price for their properties that you may be taking, and I don't hate it for them. I really don't. I think it's an opportunity for those owners. I know it to be an opportunity for the residents, and I'm no longer a resident of Destin, but the people that, you know, have to move around here, please make it easier for us to move around here. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Next up, come on up.
Shane Moody, President CEO of the Destin Chamber of Commerce, and I'm not sure if y'all have heard, but the Chamber does support this project. Have for years and years and years, and I think those of you who just ran, those of you that just ran for office, I think the first question we asked you when we sat down and met with you is, how do you feel about the Crosstown connector? The reason they didn't get up is they're all on my board, or they're past chairman, and they knew I was going to, so they didn't need to, because we were going to say the same thing. But I'm really happy to see and hear the positive tone about this project. It's the first time that I have heard such positivity coming from the dais concerning the Crosstown connector. Councilman King, you counted the 14 cars on Mountain today between Beach and Benning. That's going through a neighborhood. That takes these cars and put them going through a vacant piece where there's going to be parks, there's going to be good things. I like the park ideas. I really like the fact that they seem to be, and Jessica, I'm not an engineer, but I did not see parking areas for those parks there, which I think is awesome. It becomes a pedestrian park, which doesn't add more cars to the road. We now know where the high school's going, which is the opposite end of town, but guess what? It's on the same connector. So we're going to add 300 kids going to school there, I think is the numbers I'm hearing now, Preble.
Just the first year will expand every year.
Right, but the first year, 300 kids with the 3 grades. So that's at least 200 more cars on that stretch, and probably 100 of them coming from the west side of town, the old Destin side of town. We need to be able to get them through there easily. This has never been, in our opinion, it was never going to be a 4-lane road. It was never going to be an alternate 98. You cannot stop the tourists from taking these roads now because of Waze and Google Maps and all these other GPS products that are out there. I was in Mobile, Alabama all weekend at a semi-AAU basketball tournament, And I punched in, I didn't know where I was going, punched in, and they took me through neighborhoods. And I mean, I was winding through neighborhoods going from major business district to major business district and never getting on a big road. So that's what the GPSs are doing now. So we can't stop that. I encourage you all, I know you can't vote on it tonight, but I think I'll be here on the 17th, and we'll ask you, let's put this thing in motion, let's get it going, and let's get it to where it needs to be. And I thank you all for your hard work.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come up? Come on up. The surprise guest of the night?
Not really. Karen Marler, 616 Second Street, Destin. Okay, when I was on council in 2000, I was 42 years old. I'll be 64 in August. I'd like to have this thing done before I'm 84. That's the first thing out. Secondly, we already technically have a cross-town connector, and it's already technically alternate 98. Case in point, when Alvin's Island caught on fire and burned. If anything happens between Airport Road and Main Street, that's where the traffic goes. Sometimes it'll come back out at Main Street, sometimes it'll go all the way to Beach or even to Benning and through the dog legs. The one thing about, you were talking about the areas of, parks and things like that. Originally back in 2005, one of our things that we thought of was workforce housing, because there'd be enough land if we moved the road to one side or the other. I'm not going to debate the 4-lane or anything like that, because future councils can do a lot different than previous councils, and having served on several previous councils, it comes to mind that, whatever is best to make it that way. But, anything that you do up here today can be reversed, just like some things have been reversed that I did when I was on council. And so the basic thing is that we need the connector. And another reason to look at it is just the locals alone, okay? The water department will love this. When they had Airport Road shut down a couple of weeks ago, and it was funny watching people go around to try to get out and get around it, and there was no way to go, and that was just local traffic. On a good day, local traffic was backed up all the way here to the traffic circle. So it's something that's been needed. Unfortunately, it's been needed for over 20 years, because it was actually talked about when Mr. Destin was on council way back in the 90s. And I just think y'all just need to move forward with it, and let's quit kicking the can and do something. And unfortunately, that you've lost a council member, and you're going to have to get another council member who might have some other ideas, come July when that person takes office. And then, of course, you're going to have 3 council members that are going to be leaving, or 2 council members for sure that'll be leaving, and one that can possibly get reelected. And possibly, it's going to be kind of tough to try to bat the thing around. And I'm really saddened that there's 2 council members here not here tonight, because I know they had a lot of input in this too. But in all, I would say that let's quit kicking the can down the road. Let's get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marler. Anyone else like to step up? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public comment period. Do you have anybody queued up? Nope.
No, sir.
Ray? Nope. Council members, any final things that you'd like to say or talk about?
I
Go ahead.
noted that on the agenda item notes or discussion item, it said that one of the things we needed to discuss was how this is going to empty out down at Stallman. And I don't know that we've covered that. Is that still something that you wish us to address?
I think we already have a couple other projects, don't we? We have the study coming up, the PP&E study. Right. I mean, are you guys prepared to?
Yes, we had prepared. It's up to the council whether they want to hear that or not.
Yeah, I don't know. In light of the recommendations from the Harbor CRA, I think we've had that discussion already. Mr. Destin's pretty adamant about not, on the 4-way, not doing it. Plus, I think staff shared with us that would require quite a bit more property acquisition, which that's money as well. So I guess that's something we can take up at our council meeting and discuss further. In my mind, I think we've kind of talked about that quite a few times already, and I think the council, if I remember right at that time, and the staff could correct me, I think we were all pretty satisfied with the four-way stop instead of a roundabout at Benning and Azalea.
I think that we batted the Stallman intersection around a meeting or so ago, and we really don't have a solution yet, but we won't get a solution until we get the studies and see what kind of money we have to spend.
So
What
that-
was, well, I'd like, Mr. Zinguze, obviously this is on here, staff compiled it. Was there anything that we hadn't talked about or addressed in a prior meeting that maybe you'd hoped we'd bang around a little bit? Or what was the thought in including that item on here?
No, we just wanted to summarize all the studies that have taken place so far, and then get your thoughts on whether you need additional more study, or you want us to just kind of come up with some suggested solutions for you.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you had what you all needed.
Yeah, I think, the purpose of this workshop was to cover any ideas and see this presentation more importantly. And so we can, at our next council meeting, when this is going to be on the agenda, and we'll go ahead and get her done, good or bad or otherwise, and press forward if the council chooses to do so. So, anything else? Lance, do you have anything else for us?
No, we will be bringing back the item at next Monday's meeting to add the acquisitions back onto this contract so we can get that moving forward. And Don is making a presentation to the local TPO tomorrow to try to see if there's some future funding for that Stallman and 98 intersection improvements.
And also with Skip leaving, he was our representative on the TPO, so we need to address that as well and get a new member appointed to the Oklahooma County, Northwest Florida
And
TPO.
that's on the agenda also for next Monday night.
Okay, Johnny, did you have something?
Yeah, just something real quick. I mean, it was brought up in the presentation. This was discussed a lot before I ever sat in this seat, and the option of, I mean, I've talked to a dozen or more people about the Crosstown connector, and all of them's fear is that it's going to be a 4-lane, and clearly we've got it designed as a 2-lane, and it was discussed that if we put the infrastructure in for a 4-lane, that it would save money in the future. I mean, is that like, okay. I'm just making sure, I assured a lot of people that we would discuss that, and there's no reason to even put the infrastructure in for a 4-lane. It just, okay.
No, this council, I think the whole community is committed to a 2-lane. That's why Mr. Destin wanted the multimodal aspect added to it, because that utilizes that land for that and not anything else. Correct, sir? 30%.
Yeah, and I'm just making sure,
Well, I
it's
mean,
like, there's no
what it
sense
is
even putting the
it's
infrastructure
making,
in.
it's putting your money where your mouth is.
Right.
And that's, and I think the entire, I'm not going to speak for the council, we'll see Monday night, but I think that's the route we're going to take. All right? Okay? Well, no, without any further ado, Shane, you got one thing you'd like to add?
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry to do this right at the end. I keep hearing the Stallman intersection come up. If I remember correctly, and I just leaned over and asked Mr. Wampler, who was either chairman of our board or had just been chairman of our board at the time, and I bet if I'm not going to put Lockwood on the spot, but when the county came to us wanting us to support the half-cent sales tax for infrastructure improvements, when they finally brought us a list of projects, money from this half-cent sales tax at the county level, not Destin's share, but the county's level, was going to be used to pay to improve that intersection. So know that that was there. It was on the list of projects that they gave us, and that's one of the ways because we at the time were not in support of the half-cent sales tax. That and the improvements to Commons Drive are the things that put us over the edge to support the half-cent sales tax.
Yeah, we'll make sure. We'll make sure our staff follows through with that, because we took our portion of it. We're buying beach with it, so that's already earmarked. But we'll look into that, and we'll have that prepared for Monday night too, if you guys could. Okay. All right. Seeing no further ado, then I want to thank everyone for coming, and council members. I apologize again. Time management is not one of my skill sets. I got caught in the same traffic Mr. King did. Meeting adjourned.